Hey guys, it's Khalil and Luka again with Star Wars Politics. We started off last time, we finished off last time talking about the peace negotiation arc between um, in season three of Clone Wars between the Senator of Naboo, Senator Amidala from the Republic, and um, and Senator of Raxus. I mean, no wait, yeah,
Bonteri, yeah, Raxus
yeah,
Bonteri,
Senator
Senator
Alexis
Bonteri.
Nina Bonteri of the Separatist side, and the two of them and how they were actually very close to ending to beginning the process of ending the war through diplomacy, and it has been seen, as the first and most consequential period during the series and during the war of when diplomacy is um, is actually the strongest and where it's most able to bring to restore peace. But with this quick episode here, and it might not be so quick, it'd probably be like 20 minutes. We're just going to conclude on the significance of Padme's speech and whether or not the failure to begin negotiations to end the war can be attributed to Padme or to Palpatine for manipulating the events.
Yeah, so obviously last episode we talked about the speech which Padme gave not only in the Senate, but it was also broadcasted to people. Well, we just know around Coruscant, but maybe also in other planetary systems. And obviously, it was a very effective one, right? Her rhetoric was very strong, and a lot of people seem compelled. You can see the people are standing up and are facing towards her. And we kind of get the notion that the bill, her defense, well, she was obviously against the bill to fund the 5 million clones, and she might have been successful. And Palpatine adds towards the end of the episode, he says that it is remarkable how, you can have all the power in the galaxy, reflecting on himself. Yet, the simple voice of one senator can hold so much weight. And in this case, we assume that the notion has been repelled, and that there's not going to be the 5 million clones aren't going to be funded. However, Palpatine doesn't seem too worried about it, and that has to do with the simple fact that obviously he's rigged this conflict. He is the puppet master, puppeteering the war, and that kind of led us to the conclusion of arguing whether this speech, whether Amidala's approach of diplomacy even matters in the grand scheme of things. And you need to see it from both sides, because obviously this was seen as a victory, but as we discussed, this speech was more of a double-edged sword, where it was successful in repelling the bill. However, in light of things, Palpatine obviously knows that it's not going to stop him in the long term. The war is still going to continue on. The Separatists funded a 3 million droid bill, which is going to obviously accelerate the war efforts on the Separatist side. And as we know from even arms races that have happened here on our Earth, in our timeline, is that the Republic will eventually have to respond to this increase of droids with buying additional clones. So, how far can diplomacy actually go? That's the question. And considering obviously Palpatine's effect, how does a democracy work when there's obviously someone with who has been granted eventually over time so much power, and whether Amidala is just fighting a fight that she's already lost. So back to Khalil with those thoughts, and obviously Khalil had a different view to me, because I still believe in diplomacy. Not saying Khalil doesn't believe in diplomacy, but to the degree that Khalil is more of a realist in this regard when it comes to war. I'll let him speak on his views.
Yeah, I mean, Padme's speech, although it was admirable, and we do get an insight as to how close the war was to being resolved, to how close it was there was to peace. Because you do get the idea that even the senators as elitist and as corrupt as they are, you do get the idea that they would have actually went through with a vote to begin negotiations with the separatist side, because we see in the parliament that they supported negotiations with the Republic, and we saw that in episode 10, season 3, episode 10, the first episode of the arc. But then in the second episode of the arc, when we were brought over to when we actually saw the Republics on their side, and they were speaking in the Senate to do the same thing. And literally the people voted, but the results of the vote right before they were given an order that was an attack ordered by Palpatine, and then ordered from him to Dooku, and then from Dooku to a squadron of droids. Like, they took out the power grid system on Coruscant. We already mentioned that in the last episode. But because of that, that meant that right before the results of the vote could have been shown, the power grid went out, and then senators, they on the Republic side, they felt that they were attacked by the Separatists, which they were, and therefore their leaf branch to end hostilities was a fake. And this would probably be, I think, actually the last time that peace through negotiation was considered throughout the series, because that meant that every time going forward, when the other side wanted to possibly even think about peace, um, they they would be seen as a delaying tactic. It was like lowering their guard. And so um and actually, as we would see in a later season, this is not part of this arc, but that senator, the separatist senator Mina Bonteri, that spoke with Padme Amidala to begin this process of possible peace negotiation, she was killed by Dooku and his thugs, just for even thinking about ending the war. And so you can
Yeah,
really,
but wait. That happened right in response after the shutdown, because Count Dooku sends a message where, right? Because they do that blame game where the Republic gets blamed for the murder of Bonteri, but that was only in response to the Republic claiming that the Separatists attacked Coruscant, right? Which hadn't been attacked. It's kind of this peaceful citadel of the universe. It hasn't been attacked in over 1,000 years. Ironically enough, the last time they were attacked was by the Sith, right?
Mhm.
So obviously the Sith strike again, and we see that. I think that Bonteri's death, as you mentioned, had a big effect because it kind of closed the door for any bipartisan efforts for the future. Because as we look, it took a lot of trust to even bring up the idea of starting peace negotiations, right? And I think Palpatine, that's why Palpatine doesn't even break a sweat at this, because he knows, look, we killed the only, possible source for cooperation. And now both sides are even more split than before because of these recent attacks. Coruscant hadn't been attacked. Senators were, attacked. Especially, Amidala herself, Organa. That's why originally Organa was supposed to hold this speech, but he was, subject to an attack and couldn't come and speak. So the both sides are even further apart than before. Bontari's death once again closes the door for any rebirth of peace negotiations. And I think Amidala, even though she never really shows it, I think she understands that her efforts are exhausted, in the sense that every time Amidala takes one step forward, she's pushed back 2 steps. She obviously got the closest to any, no senator had done more for peace up to that point than Amidala in this sense, Also breaking the Republic's rules, of course, by illegally meeting up with another candidate. But it shows you how the Republic is rigged. The fact that senators can't meet without the chancellor's approval, from opposite sides, that's a bit ludicrous. That literally closes the door on any possible peace negotiations. If you're not even allowed to talk, meet, greet the opponents.
Right.
And so going back to diplomacy in this sense, in a world where all these factors, all these boulders stand in your way, it's really hard to believe that diplomacy can work in a system already rigged.
Because the senators of the Republic and even the senators of the Separatists, they don't know that the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic is a Sith, and they I wonder if the Separatists, well, they have to know the separate. Well, okay, but the Separatists, they know that Dooku is Force sensitive. I don't think they know that he's a Sith, because that would show red flags right there.
Yeah, I think they might assume, but because they think that he is kind of this rebellious figure, that he's only a Sith because he disagrees with the Jedi, not because he's a bad person. In the sense that obviously he has fought up to that point, he fought Yoda, remember Attack of the Clones, he fought Obi-Wan, Anakin. They would have, told people obviously that he's a Sith, right? But I think that the people, the Separatists, believe that the Republic is wrong in the same way that they have Jedis. It's like fighting fire with fire. That if they have this powerful Force user, it might be a Sith. But you need to realize some people think Jedis are the evil ones.
Right.
Some people view the Jedi as the Jedi would view Sith, basically. So it's more of a give or take, where they will paint the Sith as bad people, but the Separatists will view them as actual saviors and people who are fighting for their beliefs and for the right cause. I think it's a give or take scenario in that case.
Yeah, it is. And so we become very much aware, and Clone Wars, they do it they do a very good job of this, in where they very few times in the series did they explicitly say there's a conspiracy, there's a plot against the Jedi, there's a plot against the Republic, someone's in there, and they always say the Republic is corrupt. We all get an understanding just by seeing the prequels movies and by seeing just even a few episodes of Clone Wars that the Republic is corrupt. But it doesn't give the bigger picture of the idea that the person leading the Republic is leading both sides of a conflict that is meant to gain him more power. That's that we just that's bigger than just saying the Republic is corrupt. And so the Separatists, as much as they say that the Republic is corrupt, they're not aware of the bigger picture just as much as the people in the Republic are. And so there is a conspiracy to continue the war for the purpose of that one person gaining more power. And so you have an interesting situation in where any time that peace is even suggested, even worked towards like working towards peace, it is pushed back because of the intention to of that one person to gain power. And when they have that sort of personal checking authority to make sure that no senator speaks to the other side, that the idea that the Padme could go to Raxus and speak to a separatist senator, that is a very scary thing for Palpatine. And that's why in this arc some very obvious, somewhat overt actions by him that would suggest that there is an outside force being played on both sides. If any person walking around in the galaxy on the Separatist or the Republic side would have to start questioning what is really happening outside of their sphere when they look at at just exactly what has happened during that arc, because Amidala like took a real big chip into his ability to control this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And if the results of the Senate were to be in favor of negotiations, I don't think the powers of the Supreme Chancellor would allow him to strike that down.
Yeah.
He was
The
very
same way, yeah. The
like
same way Count Dooku when he first hears this idea, because they have no clue at first, right? That's a scary
no,
thing. That's what
it's a
scares
very
them.
scary thing to them.
Yeah, Count Dooku, he says like, "Oh, yeah, well, I would shut this down, but obviously I'm the leader and I have to seem democratic and I have to seem appealing to the people." So, he obviously allows that vote to go down and he obviously calls us master.
So we see a
Palpatine,
communication between Dooku and Palpatine. They're saying,
yeah,
it's like Palpatine is like, "How did you possibly allow this?" And he's like, "I don't
yeah,
know. I didn't see it coming." And then
yeah,
Palpatine's like, "I will make sure this doesn't happen in my Senate." And so we see that happen, but it was so
yeah,
close.
yeah.
It
But the thing is,
are
it's a little moment where Amidala sells herself out, and that's because he tells Palpatine who she is, right? She says, because he's like, how do you know this? Like, that makes zero sense. Like, he's like, that's ludicrous, like, haha, that's a good joke, because, obviously he would know what's happening in his own house, so to speak, right? He actually controls it. So the fact that Amidala comes up with him and says, oh, we have the possibility of peace negotiations. And he's like, oh, that's great. But he then asks, of course, like, how did you gather this information? He wants to know. And as soon as she drops the name, he already sends out the command to kill her
Yeah,
because
and
he knows that's
within
right.
minutes in the episode, she's dead, I think. Because I said it was in another
Mm-hmm.
season, but nah, I think it was actually in that arc.
Yeah, no, immediately. And I realized while watching, I was like, oh, like, Palpatine's acting. He's like, they're like, oh, can you trust this source? Who is the source? Trying to get the names, right? Like a snitch, like he's wearing a wire, basically, right? He's asking those type of questions. And what really interests me about Palpatine is the way he understands that a lot of these Amidala is very important to the plot of his, because we see throughout the Clone Wars that Amidala is a figure where he manipulates the goodness in her and the diplomacy factor into getting more emergency powers. We said later on with the Trade Federation how those powers get given to the Supreme Chancellor. Alone in the first movie, she's the one that nominates him, right? So he always understands that it's he's playing with fire a bit, but her diplomacy is a good way for him to get more powers. And the way he eventually does it is emergency powers, And there's this long history of emergency powers where if you tell me about emergency powers, the two people I think of are, of course, Adolf Hitler, and then the other one is Julius Caesar or Julius Kaiser, if you want to, have the correct pronunciation. And the interesting thing is, right, it's again going back to this thing of trust. And because these senators, they don't trust the other side, they only trust themselves, so to speak, their supreme chancellor. They end up giving the wrong person trust, right? And in Roman times, when Rome was under threat, they would put their trust into their military, right, and into their leader. And the last person they ended up giving all that power to was Julius Caesar, and he never ended up giving it up. The same way, Emperor Palpatine would end up not giving it up. And the other parallel I drew was between Adolf Hitler, who obviously used this false idea of democracy, right? This parliament, the Bundestag. He took that facade of a democracy in Germany, and even though he was in power the whole time, all the rigged elections, and it reminded me a bit of if there was an Amidala in Germany at the time, would it have mattered? Not really, because he was always going to win. That was his end game. And going back to the theme of diplomacy, honestly, in this rigged game, Amidala is not only being played, kind of, but her diplomacy has good intentions. But Palpatine is, he's literally too powerful. he always, you know, thinks ahead, and even when he gets caught off guard, like we see in this arc, he's quick to react. And he obviously already has too much power now, and there's nothing really that could stop him after this. As soon as Bonterra gets killed, that's one of the more underrated turning points in the Clone Wars, where, you know, the idea of bipartisanship just gets shut down. And, you know, how can you be diplomatic if you're not willing to talk, to discuss, to negotiate with your opponents or with, you know, potential allies, even the neutral systems, right? That door gets shut down.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of where I wanted to end up going, you know, with this episode right here, is that we see that arc with the peace negotiations between Bonteri and Amidala, and we are under, and and as much as we want to look at the conspiracy, it's through the conspiracy that we have to wonder what is the way of going about the restoration of peace. You know, do like when the conspiracy against the Jedi, the conspiracy against the Republic wants you to keep fighting, can fighting to bring about peace really be the way um to the could it really be the way to go about this, if bringing about peace through a military side is what the conspiracy against the Republic wants you to do, and what Palpatine wants you to do, and we all would see what would happen when peace was finally restored. The Empire rose up, and that's a topic for another day. But um, but the conspiracy, Palpatine wants you to keep fighting, but the negotiation is never going to work because he has all the cards. Padme, while unknowing, because we know that Palpatine is unaware of the conspiracy. We know Padme is unaware of the conspiracy. We know how little Padme knows because she name dropped Bonteri. She would have never have been so comfortable to name drop the person that she spoke to on the Separatist side, technically illegally, to begin these possible negotiations, unless she legitimately trusted Palpatine. And so that meant that she was unaware of the bigger picture of things, like most of everyone in the galaxy, when she decided to bring the Republic by speaking to Bonteri on the Separatist side.
Yeah.
You know, that when
No, absolutely.
she somehow was able to like just lazily, you know, and without any care in the world, reach through Palpatine's defenses to potentially undermine his plan for taking power, which is a really shocking thing about all this, is that she did it accidentally, you know. So can we really say, in the whole broad scale of things, you know, this is a topic for another day, the whole like broader scale, but in a broader scale of things, just really quickly, Luca, before we finish up here, like in considering the conspiracy by Palpatine in the Clone Wars, um like if Palpatine wants you to fight, fighting cannot be the best idea, because we see what would happen when Empire came about. In negotiation, while it damn near worked, it got really close with Padme accidentally. Um, like Palpatine reacted too quickly to have anything happen, and so there's really nothing that could have been done against Palpatine unless we go to like the last moments of Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. No, like Mace Windu, I think the best tactic in this case, as much as I say soldiers aren't meant to be peacekeepers to, you know, to an extent, but in that sense, the only way really is to kill Palpatine, because he is, you know, an authoritarian figure in a democracy. You know, in a sense, he's, you know, he's exceeded the term limits, right? He's garnered too much power that he hasn't given up by the time of Revenge of the Sith. And the Jedi know that there's foul play, obviously, but nobody seems to say anything, you know, and I don't know if they're scared or Palpatine just has everyone under control. But obviously, the few people actually still believe in the Senate, like Amidala, they seem blind to Palpatine, right? She never brings up the idea that, wait a minute, it's kind of undemocratic that this guy has so much power, That's more power than a president in theory has, and a chancellor isn't supposed to have that much power.
Remember that
Yeah, you
one
got,
time when she's speaking with Anakin? I think that partially in the movie they did this, and one time in the series they did it. It's like season 6 or something like that. But like she says when she's talking to Anakin, like what if we're the ones on the wrong side? What if
yeah.
we're the guys? And Anakin's like
Mhm.
separatist, just like speaking
Yeah,
his own wife.
he's just babbling about the wartime propaganda basically of the Republic.
Right. Like so Amidala, she is blind, but there's a moment when she recognizes it. And by that time,
Yeah.
like the power of a senator, the power of a peaceful negotiator has
Hmm.
been completely eroded by this time. Because she said this
Yeah.
in Revenge of the Sith, which according to Clone Wars is like season 7, the very, very end, like the 11th
Yeah.
hour. Finally, Padme is beginning to realize that she might be on the wrong side of things, that the Separatists might have been right in saying that the Republic was corrupt. And little did she know that it was being played on both sides. She didn't know to what extent
Hmm.
that it was that she was being played and everyone else was being played
Yeah.
until we actually saw like Palpatine's victory speech, and then she finally says, after
Yeah.
partially recognizing and when speaking to Anakin during the movie, and then fully recognizing it during the speech of Palpatine, and she says, "So this is how liberty dies with thunderous applause,"
Yeah.
and that's when
Yeah.
she realized that she was being played the whole time.
Yeah.
But by that point, by the 11th hour, when she's speaking with Anakin during the movie, um the power of a warrior, the power of a Jedi to to end all this chaos and kill Palpatine, there's still power in them to stop what would happen from happening. But the power of a peaceful negotiator, the power of a senator, has already been limited to such an extent that even though she partially noticed what was happening before it actually happened during the movie, when she
Hmm.
spoke with Anakin, and Anakin was like, "And you're a separatist," and because he was being duped, it was too late for her to act anyway. But the fact that it wasn't too late for someone like Mace Windu to act and kill Palpatine at the last
Yeah.
movie kind of goes to show like a bit of what you're coming to the conclusion of right now is that is that given the way how Clone Wars and how the prequels were told, and the story was told, um, the power of a warrior in bringing peace was made in this case to be stronger and more effective than than a negotiator or than
Hmm.
diplomacy, given all these cases, even considering that there is one person manipulating both sides, still the warrior is better at bringing peace. And it sounds like a contradiction, but
Hmm.
it's weird.
No, no, it does. But obviously that's the Star Wars universe, where that obviously makes a bit more sense. Yeah, no, it is a bit tragic to see the whole Senate, way away. And we see that in Andor's bit off topic, but the way Mon Mothma, for example, she stands alone in this, in this big Senate that was once filled with, not only hope, but actual senators who were looking to cooperate and bring about peace. But in a way, Palpatine managed to create his own idea of peace and order, and where he is obviously the totalitarian ruler. So the whole diplomacy idea and liberty and democracy in Star Wars is rather a tragic tale. And I think George Lucas tried to paint that picture of how we also as people, our responsibility is, because often in Amidala, she speaks to the people and how it's our responsibility to hold those in power accountable. We are still the people, and in the people lies the power. So as we look at Star Wars a bit also from a bigger perspective, that was a big message of George Lucas in the prequels and doing that Senate era, is to you can see how people rot away and how democracy can fall apart if you're too easy, if you don't have accountability and representatives such as Amidala, who obviously fails, but it's all about trying at the end of the day and trying to function in a democracy.
Yeah, so we have little time left, but that's really all we have to say about this arc and the role that it has in the Clone Wars as a whole. There are other arcs to analyze in Clone Wars. Um, um, and there are other things that we want to say about Star Wars as a whole when it comes to its politics. But this is kind of like it really helps us kind of come to a conclusion. And this, again, there's not totality in all these cases. There are times in real life when diplomacy is the way out of a conflict. But the way how Star Wars and the Clone Wars were told, and the way and how George Lucas and Dave Filoni they set up this reality made it so that a warrior is more effective than a peace negotiator, more effective than a diplomat at bringing peace. And so, with that, I'm Khalil,
And I'm Luca.
and we are the Marshals of Truth.